A very good evening to Mr. Raviban Arumugan, CEO of My Inspire, and our beloved audience. I am Dilega Manoharan from Sabah Chinese High School, Tawa Sabah, your moderator for today's event. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Buncee Week, first in Malaysia. It's a glad welcome we bring to you in this event. And I would like to thanks for all the viewers to spend your time with us. We would like you all to join us for a week-long Buncee event in Malaysia where educators across the globe will be sharing their experiences and strategies for enhancing student management, along with innovative teaching practices that you can bring back to your class. These sessions will help you learn how to use Buncee for remote, blended, or flipped instruction and beyond. Here I would like to welcome our speaker of the day. Without further ado, let me introduce our head of program, Miss Ada, in this event. She is the strategic manager at Buncee. She is passionate about improving access to quality education and engaging students worldwide. Prior to Buncee, she has worked in the public sector conducting scientific research and analysis, including the National Science Foundation as well as the Earth Institute at Columbia University in New York. So here I would like to pass over to Ms. Ada to carry on this session. Hi, Ms. Ada.
Hello. First of all, Salamat Petang, Malaysia. It's great to be here. Hello to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is day 2 of Buncee Week. So if you missed last session, we covered, how to bring Buncee into a remote learning environment. So throughout this week, what you'll be able to do as you're chiming in, especially if you're new, is learn now different strategies from different practicing educators of how you could leverage the tool to be able to support learning across different subject areas. So today's session is more specifically focused on STEM. So it's wonderful to have you all here, and it's definitely a true international collaboration. Yesterday's session, we had about individuals from 13 different countries. So while this is a Malaysia event, it's definitely international. So as you join in the chat, let us know where you're tuning in from. It'll be amazing to get to know you. So for this week, I just wanted to cover, some of the different sessions that you could participate in. So again, yesterday our session covered how you can use Buncee for remote learning. But as you go through the week with us, today's session will cover how you can actually bring Buncee into your STEM learning practice. And again, we'll have future sessions where you can learn how to make Buncee accessible, how you bring it into literacy, as well as how you could collaborate around the world and bring or create a sense of belonging in your classroom. And so with that, today's session, again, is focused on using Buncee for STEM learning, and I'm excited to introduce in a moment here Victoria Thompson, who is an amazing educator based out in the US. As an international event, she's actually tuning in at 5 in the morning for this conference. So thank you so much for taking your time to share your thoughts, your strategies, and your amazing creative ideas to help support learning across the globe. But before we get started with today's event, we have a few special surprises again as partnership with Inspire, and very much thanks to Raban for inviting us here. So in partnership for this conference, again, if you didn't tune in yesterday, as a participant in this conference, you'll be able to get exclusive extended access to your Buncee subscription. So we'll show you how to sign in, but with this extended access special for this event, you'll get up to 120 days. You'll get 60 days in total as free access that gives you a total of 120 days. So at the end of the session, you'll be able to receive a form where you could register your information. And from that, we'll follow up to give you your extended access code. So do stay tuned for that form as well as include your information. But more than anything, let's talk giveaways. So today, what we're having is another giveaway. So similar to yesterday, what we're looking to do is for those that might not be camera shy, feel free to take a photo or a selfie with us and share, an idea that you learned while you participated in today's event. So Victoria will share a number of different ideas and strategies and just best practices that she's been bringing into the classroom that hopes to really help inspire your learning. And so as you tune into this event and you head on to social, please be sure to share an idea that you learned, and at the same time tweet that on Twitter. And be sure to add the hashtag Buncee Malaysia, as well as tag Buncee, as well as 3 friends. So I'll keep this up for another moment, but if you are camera shy, don't worry, you don't have to take a photo too, but be sure to share your ideas, because that's really the spirit of this event, where we're all hoping as an international community to be able to learn and grow with one another. And the prize for this giveaway, again, similar to last time, is going to be, you will get access to Buncee for Schools. And this is a really high valued giveaway, where you as an educator, in the spirit of learning, as you start taking away these different ideas from this session, you'll be able to win a Buncee for Schools account for up to 5 educators at your school, which will cover all of your students. So be sure to tune in into our giveaway, and we'll look forward to that. And last but not least, I know we've had a number of inquiries about our personalized certificates. So yes, you can definitely expect a personalized certificate for tuning into all of the different sessions for this event. And you'll be able to receive that by the end of the conference. And that will include your name, the session that you participated in, as well as the date. So at the end of each of the sessions, especially today's, you'll be able to see that form. Again, please register your information, and in that way, you'll be able to receive your personalized certificate for tuning into today's conference. And so with that, I am excited to pass the stage to Victoria, but before we do so, I know that there were a lot of inquiries about how to get started with your Buncee account. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to set up your account, so that as you tune in into Victoria's session, you'll be able to follow along and also create with her too. So I'm just going to quickly log out here. But as you go to buncee.com, so it'll be buncee.com. You'll find yourself on this, our homepage. And in order for you to get started, you'll just press this sign up button in blue that's located on the top right-hand side of your screen. And once you hit that, it'll take you to this page where you'll see the extended trial. So what you'll do here is press get started for free and input your information after you press sign up with your email. So sign up with your email, or if you have a Google account or a Microsoft account, you could equally sign up with these as well. And then again, this will be how you could, participate in the session itself. And we'll be sharing you the access code hereafter. But with that, I'm excited to pass the stage here to Victoria. And so Victoria, as a quick introduction here, Victoria is a STEM transformation integration coach that's based out in Washington in the US. She's worked a range of different STEM roles in her K through 12 career. But she is based and she works with the Taft Sahali School out in Washington. And I'm excited to introduce her because she has a number of different ideas and experiences where she's been able to leverage different technologies, including Buncee, to really start to engage students in STEM learning and do it in a very creative way where our kids are actually able to get engaged and feel inspired to take their learning to the next level. And with that, Victoria, I'm excited to pass the stage to you.
All right. Yay, I'm in. Hello, everybody. I know it's evening for most of you, but it's 5 o'clock in the morning in Seattle. So very good morning or good evening or wherever you are to all of you. And I'm super excited today to talk about using Buncee with STEM. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And share. All right. So what I have up here is the title slide for using Buncee with STEM. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So my name is Victoria Thompson. I am a STEM transformation integration coach at a middle school here in the Seattle area. And I'm an instructional coach, which essentially means that I teach teachers how to be better in their practice, but with a focus on STEM. And I love using Buncee, which is why I'm pumped to be here. And my Twitter handle is @VictoriaTheTech, which you can see down here at the bottom. If you'd like to connect with me, I tweet a lot about math, about bread. I love to bake, a lot about technology. So yeah, if you're on Twitter, let's connect. And with that being said, let's begin. So the first part that I always like to introduce is why use Buncee with STEM? And I think that that's a very important topic to cover because when I think of using Buncee when I was a classroom teacher, especially at the middle and the high school level, I got a lot of inquiries from teachers as to how we could actually use it at the higher level for STEM, but it's honestly pretty simple, right? So here are my big 4 concepts as to why I like to use Buncee with STEM. First and foremost, it helps to introduce students to concepts through a different medium. When I think of STEM, right, science, technology, engineering, and math, most of the content when I was growing up, and also like as I started as a classroom teacher, most of my department was giving it as lectures. So it was a lecture, or maybe it was a short lesson, you know, maybe we did a lab of some sort. There wasn't really a lot of creation, and there wasn't really a lot of like creative thought that was put into the lesson. So STEM and Buncee is a match made with that. Also, it's a great idea to introduce and continue education on customs, cultures, and competencies. As a former math educator, and especially now in my new role, I do a lot of work on making sure that my curriculum is not only accessible for my kids, but it's also inclusive. So instead of just looking at math from Rome, right, or maybe Greece, I'm looking at math customs, math cultures, you know, math educators and math leaders all over the world. And Buncee has a lot of great tools that help with that. Also, wonderful way to connect STEM academic content to language arts, history, music, and beyond. Lots and lots of great apps and features in Buncee that take STEM out of the box and can help you do a lot more. And then last but not least, it's a wonderful way to teach digital citizenship alongside academic instruction. So if you've got students that are maybe new to technology, or perhaps they're not new, and they're just trying to learn more about how to be a digital citizen in school, Buncee is a great tool to help and teach that. So here are some things to consider baseline before you even get started. The first thing you need to consider is, especially in STEM, is Buncee going to be the vehicle for learning or the platform for creating content? So basically we start with our Buncee and we can go 2 different ways. Vehicle for learning means that Buncee would essentially be used as like a jacked up PowerPoint, right? You've got it on screens, or maybe the kids are working at their own pace. There are slides that they can click through, similar to how I'm doing now, right? That would be considered the vehicle for learning. And you can add media, pictures, videos, you know, Khan Academy, all of that stuff. But essentially it is used to tell the story of the lesson. The other side of this is using Buncee as a platform for creating content. So if you teach a lesson, if you're working with your students, and perhaps you want them to do a creative activity or just maybe some, you know, explanation of their work, Buncee is also a great platform for that. So Buncee can be used in STEM in a multitude of different ways, but these are the main 2 that I typically ask for people to consider at first. Also, how familiar are your students with Buncee? I know that in all of my roles, this has definitely been a learning curve, and they catch it really quickly, but for a lot of them, they're just not familiar. So I did a Buncee like 101 demo with them. I made sure that they knew how to create a Buncee. I made sure that they knew the apps and features. I also made sure that they knew how to share the Buncee as well. So if your students are new to Buncee, that's a consideration that you might want to keep in mind. And also, will you model how to use Buncee with your students? That kind of goes hand in hand with the second question, right? If they're not familiar, it might be a good idea to model that with them. If they are more familiar, then you have a little bit more wiggle room to let them be creative in that space. And also, of course, making sure that you're monitoring. So what I've done for first timers or maybe new people to Buncee is in my old role as a K-12 math teacher, I actually created a Buncee checklist to help with this. So you're going to see me switch tabs. But this is the Buncee with STEM checklist that I've created, and there are 3 different sections. The first section is just before the lesson. What are you asking yourself? And these are just key questions to keep in mind, right? What would you like for your students to learn? What standards are you pulling from? What curriculum are you pulling from? At the end of the day or the end of the lesson, what would you like them to learn? Also, what kinds of resources do you already have that you can include in your Buncee, right? As teachers and educators, we typically have a lot already at hand. What do we already have that can enhance the Buncee? Also, how will the lesson structure flow? And when will you need to introduce the Buncee? And that kind of plays into, is it the vehicle for content? Or is it, what we're using as the creative force here? So when are you going to introduce that Buncee? We're going to be going over these 2 sections in just a few moments. But just when you're creating your Buncee, keep accessibility in mind. We want it to look clean. We want to watch for patterns, graphics, font size, font color, all of those things. I also always encourage people to explore features that will help enhance content. So for example, like former math educator, Khan Academy is in Buncee. It's one of the only platforms that has it. You better believe I was putting Khan Academy videos, when I was making my Buncees, right? Anything that helps enhance the content is wonderful. Now, when you or your students are ready to share what you've created, there are lots of different ways to share. I like to embed my links into my lessons for safekeeping. This is really influential and important during remote or virtual learning, because then my kids can just go back and keep accessing it. Buncee boards are always wonderful. And then, as always, if you feel comfortable, share out with your department or school. So this checklist will be available to you. That way you can use it in your own instruction. So we went over why to use Buncee. We went over things to consider. Let's talk a little bit about how we get started. So this whole section right here flows directly into the STEM checklist that I just shared. And these are 4 guiding questions that I always ask myself before any lesson, but definitely more so whenever I use Buncee. So, of course, number 1, what would I like for my students to learn? For number 2, what kind of resources do you already have that you could include in the Buncee? You can see me looking back right now, because in my last institution, we did a trigonometry project, and I let them, make storybooks. So this is from a previous student, and she did SOHCAHTOA dining. So that's sine, cosine, tangent, right? So I use this picture book that she created as a starting point to kind of introduce sine, cosine, and tangent before we created our Buncee. So this was something I already had on deck from a former student. You might already have things, in your classroom as well. Also, what kind of materials will you need to actually begin your lesson, right? Usually in STEM, I'll begin with what is called a visual activator. So typically that will have a picture. Sometimes it has nothing to do with STEM. Sometimes it has everything to do with STEM. So for example, if I were to take my tea mug, right? And that could be a visual activator. I show the picture and I ask for them to explain to me what they see and how it could relate to STEM. So sometimes it's more abstract, sometimes it's more concrete, but that's something to consider when you start your lesson. And of course, how will the lesson structure flow, and when will you actually introduce the Buncee? So again, is it the vehicle for the content, right? Or is it going to be what we do to create our final product? That's how we get started. Now let's talk a little bit more about the specifics about using Buncee with STEM. And there are lots of different ways, so many cool things you can do. But what I like about these, and I picked these specifically because they can be done in person or they can be done with virtual or remote learning. So these are things that you can do whether your institution is face-to-face or if it is virtual. And I'll also, of course, give examples as to how I did it in my classroom. First and foremost, we can create, upload, and share videos of demonstrations, lessons, and activities with students. Both in person and remote, this was so beneficial to me because what I did with my math classes and my math courses is I would actually create Buncees with audio and video in it. So in that case, I was using my Buncee as the vehicle for the content, right? It was like a PowerPoint 2.0. But what I did was I added audio, I added media, I added Khan Academy, I added checkpoints and activities for my students, and that was homework, right? So, we didn't have the homework where it was 5 problems or 10 problems or 20 problems or whatever. It was, I want you to listen and learn from this. That way, when we come to class tomorrow or whenever, right, you are prepared. And it was revolutionary for my classroom. I was able to flip my classroom. My students were more engaged. They were amazed at just how much Buncee could do. And this was a great way to introduce personalized learning because instead of just, following along with me, as a teacher on the board, they were able to do it at their own pace, which was wonderful. So I highly, highly recommend that. Also, using Buncee as a student collaboration hub for brainstorming. I tend to do this a lot with math with Buncee boards, and those are wonderful. Also, using Buncee as a platform for project creation with a variety of media, and I'll show you what that looks like today, this morning or this evening. Also, Buncee has QR code integration, which is super duper cool. Not a lot of platforms have this, but with QR codes, what you can do is you can actually generate them within your Buncee and add them to certain spaces. And what I like to do is I'll do a virtual scavenger hunt with the kids. Also, we can use drawing capacities for explanation, elaboration, and creativity in STEM. Personally, at my old institution, we had MacBooks. And if you're familiar with MacBooks, they do not have a touch screen. That was kind of difficult for my students because we didn't have, those easy drawing capabilities. This is where Buncee stepped up and was a hero because we were able to draw directly on the Buncee. We can elaborate, we can be creative. So it was a space for them to draw diagrams, right? That's a big part of STEM. Pictures, right? If they wanted to explain their thinking that way. So the drawing capabilities are very helpful in STEM. And then I always like to give a shout out to Khan Academy, just because I don't really see a lot of platforms that have that embedded directly in. Khan Academy, if you are not familiar, it is a mostly math-based, but it's got STEM, it's got ELA, it's got history. It pretty much has everything at this point. But what's wonderful about Khan Academy is that it is videos with quizzes and, competency checks and content checks that are embedded directly in there. So another great platform to, encourage that personalized learning, but it's already in Buncee, which just makes it so much easier for your students to use. So these are some wonderful ways that I like to use Buncee with STEM. And speaking of that, here are some examples that I pulled from my instruction. So what I did was I pulled one for middle school. I pulled one for primary school, right, or elementary school. And then I've also pulled one for secondary school or high school. That way you can just kind of see how it works across all disciplines. So this is a middle school example that I did with my students. And this is lines, angles, and angle relationships in the community and the world. So this was a STEM project that we did in my integrated math class. And essentially what the project boiled down to is they were looking at buildings that were within our community, right? So like we live in Seattle area, we're outside, we're looking at buildings. We are specifically looking for lines, we are looking for angles, and we are looking for angle relationships that we see, right? So like, for example, in my office, I can see right angles, right? Because it's a rectangular room. I can see perpendicular lines, right? Because they're making 90-degree angles. So I encourage kids to look for that just within our respective spaces. Then what I wanted them to do, and this is where that tech and engineering portion comes in, is we were picking buildings that are of interest to us in the world at large. We were doing like a half history assignment where we were looking up the history of that building, talking about the relationships that we see there. And then the other half of it was then they got to be the engineers and they got to say, okay, if I want to, renovate this building, what kind of materials do I need? What kind of new lines and angles and angle relationships are going to form, right? What will the building look like? What kind of math is involved? It was a very comprehensive project. So you're actually going to have access to this project for you to, modify, adjust, or if you just straight up want to use it. But this on the left, you can see the rules. And on the right, you can see the rubric that I used. What I encouraged my students to do was then we decided to do it in either a Word document or a Buncee presentation for the final, hey, let's share. No surprise, most of my students chose Buncee. And it's really cool because even though this is more of like a simpler Buncee or like a simpler slide, you can just tell how clean it is, right? We've got the picture, we've got the title slide, we've got the body of the text, right? And it's hitting every single point. So the first part of this was talking just specifically about the history. So this is that first component where I asked for them, to do the research. And then we've got some math in here, right? So the student actually took pictures inside this cathedral and of course is explaining what they have observed here. So great way to tie in the tech, great way to tie in that engineering component, great way to tie in the math, and of course, a great way to tie in Buncee for that. I'm going to switch my tab so I can show you my adding or subtracting. So on top of being a math teacher, I also did like a STEM cooking class, which I loved because we got to do science and math and we also got to cook. And one of the things I did, because it was with smaller children, okay, we're talking grades K through 2. I wanted to make sure that if I told them to add, 1 cup, right? Or if I wanted them to add 1 teaspoon or 2 teaspoons, that they knew exactly what that meant. Or if maybe we overmeasured with flour, or perhaps we undermeasured with something, that they knew how to fix that. So this is wonderful because it comes directly from what's called the Buncee Ideas Lab. And the Buncee Ideas Lab is great. It is essentially pre-made templates that teachers have done. And they put it up on the Ideas Lab for you to modify, adjust, or even use outright in your respective classrooms. So I actually modified this from the Ideas Lab. It's just a very simple adding and subtracting, something you would see in like a kindergarten first or second grade class. And you'll notice the directions that are up in the top left. It says use the drawing tool to add a plus or minus to each box. That basically will complete that number sentence, right? So again, drawing tool, is wonderful here. And it also gives students the creative agency to use the technology and get familiar with Buncee at a young age with math. All right, we did middle, we did primary. I almost said secondary because we're about to do secondary. So the secondary lesson that I did with my students was the trigonometry applications lesson. Just as a bit of a throwback and as a reminder, I did begin this lesson with SOHCAHTOA dining. So this was something that a former student created for me in a class, okay? So I went through the picture book with them. The lesson itself was focused on the basics of sine, cosine, and tangent. What I did then was in Buncee, I wanted for them to show what they knew. So I'm going to switch my tab again because this was the template that I used for my class. I wanted a basic overview of what is sine, cosine, and tangent, or SOHCAHTOA, right? If we're talking about, the actual applications. So you'll notice we've got like a quick overview that I wanted them to fill out. We've got our 3 primary functions, our sine, our tangent, and our cosine. And I also wanted them to give a little bit of information about inverses as well, because those are important. Then for each of the main ones, I wanted for them to do a practical application. So coming up with a word problem of sorts directly in Buncee. I gave them the option to just straight up type it out, because Buncee's got a lot of different features. If they wanted to do an audio overplay, they could. Most of them chose to draw what the application was and also draw their findings. So we've got it for sine, we got it for cosine, and we've also got it for tangent. I also wanted for them to do a practical application of an inverse, right? Because when we were learning about inverses, I wanted to make sure that they completely understood what it was, because inverses can be tricky. And then I also wanted them to give 3 takeaways for right triangle trigonometry. So in the secondary space, this was the template that I used. Now, some students wanted to go rogue, which is fine. And they decided to go ahead and just kind of do their own thing, which again is awesome because that's what Buncee is all about. So those are 3 examples as to how I used Buncee with STEM in elementary, middle, and high school or secondary. So now it's going to be our turn. I'm going to be modeling in a moment just kind of how I start to finish, with all of my Buncees. But something I'd like you to think about is one STEM topic that you'd like to introduce, reteach, or reinforce with your students. So introduce, reteach, or reinforce. One way that you can integrate media and Buncee, because there are lots of different ways that you can do that. And then also one way that you can extend the lesson to your students by actually giving them the chance to create content in Buncee. So these are the guiding questions I usually think of if I'm restructuring a lesson, right? Like if I've already done something and I know it's awesome, but I want to include Buncee, right? These are the 3 guiding questions. So what we are going to do together is I am going to walk you through the process of how I begin with Buncee with STEM start to finish. And I'll also show you the finished product of a really, really fun Buncee and one of my favorites. So we have the login information, right, and how to actually log in. I'm already logged into Buncee. So you're going to see me flip over to my dashboard right now. And I'm going to click on Create a New Buncee. Going to go ahead and do that. All right, I like Buncee 3.0 because it's the most updated and it's got all the features, so why not? So as I get to Buncee, this is the screen that is going to pop up. Okay, now what I'm going to do is the standard that I'm focusing on is like a middle school, elementary school science standard, and it's going to be based on ecosystems, right? So the standard that I'm specifically looking at is how do the organisms within an ecosystem all connect to each other, and maybe how does one organism dying offset, the ecosystem as a whole, right? So this was a standard that I taught 5th and 6th grade science, but it extends up to secondary biology and life science, and also extends down, to like basic, like kindergarten, 2nd grade, 1st grade science as well. So this will be a science one. All right, so with that in mind, I'm taking a look, and you'll notice that there are some things on the left-hand side, beginning with newly added. So these are things that have newly been added to Buncee. I can also click through for some recently used. So these are ones that specifically I have recently used. And you'll notice the add or subtract right here, right? And that was from my elementary lesson. But something that you'll also notice is that if I go to the top search bar in the top left, and let's just say that I want like a consistent template throughout my Buncee, I'm going to type science. Lots of different categories that I can choose from. One thing I'd like to point out right now is that a lot of platforms will do this with the backgrounds. Buncee, I think, by far has the coolest ones and also has the coolest apps. A big question that I get a lot in my new role is, how is Buncee different from PowerPoint? Right off the bat, this is the first way, but I'm going to show you more things that automatically elevate it above PowerPoint, right? Buncee is by far, I think, much better. So what I'm going to do, I'm looking. There's so many cool ones. I think I'm just going to go with this one, and I'm going to use this template. So it says my video science journal. I'm going to actually change that context, because even though we're not doing like a science journal, there are still some things in that elementary, middle science space that I think lends itself really well to this template. And first thing I'm noticing right now is that we have animation at the bottom, which is great. So something awesome about Buncee is that you can actually have digital animation that is within there. With STEM, I find this to be really helpful for students to bring concepts together. So what I'm going to do, it says my video science journal. I'm going to double click to edit. And instead of my video science journal, I am going to say, this ecosystems. Let's do that. Ooh, my computer is being kind of finicky. All right, I'll just leave it there for now, and I'll move this around and see if that works, since my computer is being a little bit slow, but that's okay. All right, something else that you can do while we're here is, if you click on the plus button off to the top right corner, you can see that I can add lots of different things. So we've got the basics over here in like the goldenrod, like yellow Buncee color, text, shapes, and drawing. Over with this red color over here, we've got some more cool things we can add, like 3D things, emojis, messages, stickers, right? My favorites are typically over here in the blue and the green. So this is where I can take a photo. This is where I can add an image directly from the web. This is where I can upload something, right? So lots and lots and lots of cool things that we can do here. And then over here, we've got our QR codes, which I also love for our digital scavenger hunts or virtual scavenger hunts. All right, so what's super cool is that with the Buncee templates, and if you wanted to start from scratch, we've got this here. It says question. This is typically how I would start a STEM, right, with like a visual activator. I like this template because it says add your video in this space. Even though it says add video, you could easily add like a visual activator. You could add a picture. And what you're seeing with me right now is I just deleted that text, right? So what I could do here is I can actually modify this Buncee template to however I see fit. So if mine is on ecosystems, a big guiding question that I might ask my students could be, what is an ecosystem? And I typed, there we go, awesome. So what is an ecosystem? That's there. What I could also do, since we are learning about ecosystems, I'm interested in adding a Buncee animation. So I might type something like animals. And kind of thinking about the ecosystem that I'm about to show you, it is an aquatic ecosystem. So I'm thinking a jellyfish might be a good idea. Yeah, there we go. So what I like about Buncee is we've got this seamless, right? We've got this seamless animation that is within there. It's not clunky, you know, or staggering like it is in other platforms. I really, really, really like that. What we can also do too, why don't we add a 3D image? I'm just gonna say ocean. And if I want to add the ocean, there are lots of cool ones I can pick from. I think this one is speaking to me today. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in this space. I'll add that at the bottom. I don't know of any other platform that has 360 or 3D imagery at this point. So as a STEM instructor and a STEM coach, the fact that it's 3D really gives that element of, wow, I'm really there, right, to the kids. So we can continue to do more of the same with all of the other templates. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm opening up my incognito and my screen is still being shared. And this was the final one that I did with my ecosystems with my students. So for context, the Salton Sea is located in California, and it is an aquatic ecosystem that is, how do I want to say this? It's very salty, like literally salty, to the point where not a lot of animals can thrive there. And because of that, the ecosystem is set off a little bit with its equilibrium. So we, as a class, had a mock trial about the Salton Sea. And again, this is that element of STEM where we're not just like, you know, listening to a lecture and doing a quiz and doing a lab. We brought debate, which is typically like a social studies, language arts type thing, into the STEM classroom. And it was super cool. The kids loved it. So I started with a bit of context, and you might have noticed on the first page that visual activator that was the sea, and there was also a lot of kinetic movement there, you know, with the 3D imagery and also with the media. I entered with a think, pair, share about what they remembered of what they learned about the Salton Sea. We talked a little bit and touched base on, again, the background of the Salton Sea. So what it is, why it exists, the town surrounding it, right? Just giving background context about the Salton Sea. Some more background, pretty self-explanatory. And there we go. Now we've got some media. And this was something I was able to pull directly from Buncee. It was super simple. All I did was I was able to type and figure out what video I wanted to use. I could upload it or take it directly from the source, and I put it directly into my Buncee for my kids to access. Just giving some more context for the kids. So we put a mosquito on trial, which is as ridiculous as it sounds, because we were going to discuss the environmental ethics of the Salton Sea and determine if surplus species living there are maintaining the equilibrium of the ecosystem or throwing it off. We named the mosquito Berry Bite. We put, it was him 1 year, her another year on trial. And 1 year, a student's parents actually made her a mosquito costume, which was hilarious, but wonderful as well. I gave kind of set norms for the courtroom because remember, we were debating. Super duper duper fun time. And we had the defense speaking. We had the prosecution speaking. We had a deliberation period as a class. So I had them put in defense, prosecution, and jury, and that's how they, worked it out. As a class, we gave the final verdict, and we also opened it up for closing questions. So again, this was an example of Buncee kind of being used for the vehicle of the content, because I went throughout this Buncee when we did this debate as a class, but I also had them do takeaways in Buncee as kind of like a, hey, what did I learn? So a really neat way to bring STEM, right, into Buncee and also introduce these concepts as a class. All right, I'm bringing up my window again. I'm gonna go back to the now it's our turn, because as I close out, just here are some takeaways I'd like you to think about. First and foremost, always begin with the topic that you'd like to either introduce, reteach, or reinforce with your students, right? So typically what I do, if I'm going back to my lessons and I want to integrate Buncee, I think about the topic first, and then I can dive into the content. When you think about integrating media and Buncee with your STEM content, or even if you want to just have the STEM and the Buncee segmented, always make sure that it's accessible to your students. Play around with it a bit, because as you can see, there are so many cool features that you can actually use within Buncee to bring your lesson alive. And then if at any way possible, absolutely use Buncee to create content with your students. The traditional projects, although I love them, I think that Buncee just has way more to offer in this space, especially with STEM being there. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that's what I got. So thank you so much.
No, I mean, honestly, Victoria, that was amazing. I loved your display of just how you've been able to bring visuals to your students, because I think it's something that we take for granted, especially when we teach them, where we almost think of it as a sort of rote approach where we say, hey, learn about this topic and this definition or this equation, and then here's the different parts. But really what engages students, like you've just demonstrated, is that creative component where they start to feel part of the learning process itself. They'll be able to visualize it more clearly, and then in that way helps them to just better communicate what they've learned. So honestly, thank you. There's been an outpouring of support and thanks for the ideas that you've shared today. And so in terms of the questions, so we do have a few minutes left. If you guys want to add some more questions, I know that we were able to cover them as the session had gone through. But in the meantime, honestly, it's been so amazing to hear your thoughts, your ideas, the creative strategies that you've shared. And at 5 in the morning, if I may add myself. So
yes, it's crazy. I started the day when it was dark, because my lights are on, and now the sun is rising.
Yeah, and so we're so appreciative of your time. And so I know that there's all the questions that have come in have been covered, but I thought if you might be able to just share your screen one last time, because I know that you've touched on Ideas Lab quite a bit. And we've been able to show a little bit about the templates library, but Ideas Lab, as you've mentioned, is a place for other folks to just be able to easily get started. So if you have a second to just share that, because I know you've been able to pull some activities from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me just a second.
Yeah, of course. And in the meantime, folks, as you tune in, feel free to drop any other questions that you might have before we end the session officially.
So this is the Ideas Lab, and I particularly like this as a STEM teacher because I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel, right? Or not having to recreate something if somebody has already done it. So what I'll typically do is I'll go to the Ideas Lab and I will take a template, I'll modify, I'll adjust, I can do whatever I need to for my students. Oops, I did not mean to click on what is Buncee. So let me go back. There we go. Okay, so as a former math educator, I'm just going to go ahead and type in math. And when I do that, you'll notice that there are at least, 55 that are going on here for lots of different things. So everything from practicing counting and following directions to, cooking measurements. And I've actually used this one before, creating secret math messages. I've used this with escape rooms before, discovering patterns. And what you can do is you can then filter based off of topic or grade level. So let's say that I wanted to do like middle school math buncees. I can whittle that list down even more, which is wonderful. Even if I didn't want to do math, right? Let's say that I wanted to do like science. I can go ahead and just kind of filter by that topic area, but I can also filter like if I want an elementary science. These templates are already right here for you. So if you're new to Buncee, or maybe if you're a beginner, I highly, highly, highly recommend that this is your starting point. I always like to see what people have done first, right? That's kind of the person I am. I like to kind of look at examples and take it from there. But if any of these catch your eye, all you have to do is click that create this button, and then you are good to go. And it sets it up directly for you in Buncee.
Yep, exactly. And honestly, that's definitely a great summary because truthfully, Ideas Lab is really meant to be your ongoing source of inspiration across different subject areas, especially if you don't know where to start. Because, sometimes it's hard to light that creative flame, right? Especially when you're doing it solo. So in those instances, you don't have to worry. There's definitely the templates library accessible to you as well as the Ideas Lab. And Ideas Lab in that sense is, as Victoria just quickly touched upon, has ideas that are contributed actually by educators all throughout our community. So you'll have this inspiration of how other people are actually bringing Buncee into their practice, no matter what subject area that might be. And so with that, honestly, thank you so much. It looks like a lot of folks are just more so sharing their support versus the question. So you've covered comprehensive detail here. So with that, just before we end the session, we had just dropped the link on the screen itself. So if you look on the bottom here, so please be sure to register your information. Like I mentioned, what we'll do is share all of the different resources that Victoria had shared. So including that STEM checklist that she had covered, as well as those two different worksheets. One was the activity worksheet as well as the rubric. And you can use that as your own inspiration for how you're going to leverage Buncee into your classroom. And we'll also be able to share the recording of the session itself, as well as your extended access code. And now in terms of the certificates, we will be sharing the personalized certificates for each and every one of you for attending today as well as yesterday's session. Again, that will include your name, your association, as well as where you, the session that you've tuned into, which is today as well as yesterday. And so with that, honestly, thank you so much, Victoria. I know that it's been a very early morning for you, but you had so much energy at such an early time that you really continue to inspire me in so many different ways.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so thank you so much to everyone, and we hope that you will tune in for the coming sessions we have for this week. Again, they will cover, how to create, how to use Buncee to make learning accessible, how to use it to collaborate globally, among many other different topics. And so with that, there's one last thing I need to share, which is about our giveaway. So if you guys have been able to tune in throughout the session and share on Twitter, you still have a chance to share something that you've learned. We'll be announcing the winner in just about an hour. So if you still want to participate, there's Victoria here on the side. Take a little session selfie with her as her instructor and share one idea that you've learned with her. So when you do that, be sure to tag Buncee, first of all, 3 different friends that you want to share your ideas with, as well as the hashtag Buncee Malaysia, so that we'll be able to follow along your learning journey. And so with that, honestly, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we pass it back over to our moderators?
Yeah, just thank you so much. This was wonderful. I'm so glad I was able to just, share Buncee with STEM, how I use it in my classroom, and, just spread that Buncee love. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again. And, if you want to get in touch with us, feel free to follow us at Buncee, as well as Victoria, if you want to just share your Twitter handle.
Yeah, it is at Victoria the Tech. So Victoria, my first name, and then Tech, Tech.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And Ms. Delega, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Veda and Ms. Victoria, for your great explanation about using Buncee for STEM. Thank you so much. Dear viewers, please stay tuned for our tomorrow's session. And don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel to know more information about Buncee. Dear educators, please fill in your attendance form based on the link that is appearing on the screen. And then don't forget to check out our Buncee Twitter page and check for the winners list after an hour of this event. Dear our beloved educators, once again, I would like to remind you to stay tuned for our tomorrow's event with another exciting information about Buncee. Till then, we'll catch up with you all tomorrow. Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.